If you're thinking about buying a foreclosure house in Canada, those bank repos, those super sweet deals, buyer beware. Hey there, and welcome to Bald Prairie Real Estate. My name is Matthew Pfeifer, real estate agent in Regina. That's my trusted assistant, 𝗕𝗲𝗍. And on this video, I'm going to explain to you everything you need to know about bank foreclosures and power of sales. That's actually two different things. A lot of people don't realize that. And yes, there's some great opportunities to get really good deals when you buy those foreclosure houses. But also, there's some significant pitfalls that could actually make this deal a terrible one. I don't want you to get caught in that trap. But before we get into it, let's start off with another one of my terrible bad dad jokes. Why don't crabs share? Because they're shellfish. If you have a terrible joke that I can use in a future episode, put it in the comments below. Let's get into it. First, let's go over foreclosure, bank repossession. I think that's the term most people are familiar with, and that's generally what people are saying they're looking for when they want to buy these bank repos. Foreclosure is when somebody has actually had the bank come over and take over ownership, take legal possession of the title of the property, and generally they will remove the existing homeowners of the property completely vacant when you go to see it. Next is what's called power of sale, and it's similar to foreclosure. The bank has now got the legal authority to force the sale of the property, but what's different here is two important things. Generally, but not always, the seller has the ability to catch back up on their payments, and if they do, they continue on owning that property and the sale would be terminated at that point. And as well, the big legal difference here is that the banks are required to get fair market value for this property, because any profits after the bank has been paid out to lawyers, the real estate agents, etc., actually belong to the previous legal owners of the property. So if there's $100,000 of profit, everybody gets paid out, and whatever's remaining actually goes back to the original owners. Let's talk about the benefits of buying a bank foreclosure in Canada. And the first one is the lack of emotion. I think this is one of the most important ones. When you're buying a house from an owner-occupied seller, generally, this is a house that they raised their family and they've got some emotional ties to it, and that can be harder to get that deal together or get the price that you want, because generally they've got that attachment to it and think it's potentially better, worth more than what you think it is. When you're dealing with a bank, there's no emotions to it. It's basically just the numbers work or they don't. The second benefit is, of course, the banks are motivated. They don't want to keep these houses on the books for very long. They didn't want to take them over in the first place. So you have the ability to kind of throw in a lower offer and see what happens. You never know. I just had a house recently where we put an offer and we thought had no chance of getting accepted, and the banks took it as is. So throw an offer in and see what happens. The third advantage relies very much on you, actually, and that is that you're going to have to look past what the house currently looks like, and can you take on that work and actually fix it up to its true potential? Because more often than not, these bank foreclosure houses, well, they're not in the greatest shape. And that's very true if it was a situation where maybe an investment property was taken over, the tenants don't care at all, and often they're really badly damaged. Or if the owner was forcibly removed from the house, they probably weren't maintaining it at the end of that process. So you have to look past the current state it's in, and it can be pretty ugly, and be able to look and see how can you make this house better than it sits today, and how can you improve that value the most, and can you take that work on as well? That's going to be the most important thing. Can you take that project on? Because it could be a very substantial one, but the reward could be there. That could be a true diamond in the rough. I said at the beginning of the video, buyer beware, and this couldn't be more true when it comes to buying a bank foreclosure in Canada. These pitfalls of buying a bank repossession could make the difference between buying a great deal and an absolute nightmare. Let's say you've gone out and you've found that perfect house, you've done all your due diligence, you've got your financing arranged, you've removed all your conditions, if there were some, you have bought that perfect diamond in the rough deal. Well, in some provinces, BC being one of them, it's not really a firm sale to you at that point, because what will happen next is it goes back to court, and the judge will then read out the details of the offer, including the sale price, and anybody in attendance can put up their hand and make an all-cash offer for a higher price and scoop that great deal out right underneath you. Any money you've already put into this property in terms of inspections is all gone, unless of course you increase your offer, and all of a sudden now this might not be as good a deal as it once was. Now I want to talk about some of the clauses I have seen in agreement purchase and sale on these bank repossessions that banks will sneak in there, and if you're not paying attention, they're probably going to screw you on these deals. I get why banks are putting them in. They've got opt-out clauses, they're reducing their liability for taxes, errors, etc. We'll kind of go through them one by one here. The first clause I see in a lot of contracts is a termination clause or an opt-out clause for the bank. And it allows them to terminate that agreement they have with you, the purchaser, for any reason without any recourse. If it's a power of sale and the original owner has caught back up on their payments, They may terminate the agreement they have with you and give it back to the original owners. They're actually legally obliged to do so if that happens. Or if somebody walks in and gives them more money than what you paid, and this could be literally the day before possession, somebody offers them more money, they're going to terminate the agreement that you have and go to that other purchaser. So just be aware, the banks, for the most part, can opt out of the agreement at any time for any reason. Next, let's talk about what I will consider error clauses. So for example, if the property is listed as a 1,200 square foot house and it's actually only 1,000 square feet, and you find that out and you go to try to sue the bank, they'll just say, oops, not our fault. We put the error clause in. We're not liable for any errors. The same thing applies to leases. The bank is under no obligation to terminate any existing leases, and they're actually not obliged to even tell you about the leases. Can you imagine if you thought you bought a house and then found out that there's actually a lease that's been signed and there's a tenant there that now you have to terminate the lease somehow? The bank can just say, not our problem anymore, your problem now.
I need that money.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
The last one I've seen is the banks basically saying, we're not paying the taxes. So if there's any sort of transfer taxes or they're behind on the property taxes, the bank may just put up their hands and say, not our problem, your problem, you bought the house. What I'm trying to say is do your due diligence and read through those contracts and understand what some of those pitfalls are where the bank could just terminate the contract, for example, and you're left high and dry. The bank's gonna have better lawyers than you do. They've done this far more times than you have. So just please make sure you do all your due diligence and understand what type of a contract you're signing and what potentially the exit clauses or error clauses that the bank may have built into that contract. Now that you know the pros and cons of buying a bank foreclosure in Canada, how do you actually go about finding these properties? And unfortunately, the answer is they're actually kind of hard to find. There's not a website or place you can go to that's just bankforeclosures.com. That would actually be kind of cool. Somebody may want to start that one up. But most of the time, you're going to have to go through an agent because they will have kind of a search portal they can create that will have all of the foreclosure properties available. This actually isn't that easy to do. So quick explainer of how I go about doing it is I type in kind of as a wildcard search that is going to be all the lawyers, the big lawyer firms in Regina, what their names are, or the insurance companies in Canada. So you got Sagen, CMHC, and Canada Guarantee. And then I'll also put on there all the big names of the big banks and the credit unions here in Saskatchewan as the owner name, because that will then pick up all properties that are for sale, power of sale, that'll be generally under the lawyer's name. If it has been a full foreclosure, that will be under the bank's or sometimes the insurer's name. As I'm recording in the spring of 2024, we are seeing delinquency rates on the rise, and those higher delinquency rates will result eventually in more power of sale and foreclosure listings coming up for sale. And I've seen a lot of people talking how there's been this huge surge of foreclosures in Toronto. And to put it kindly, that today is a very misleading statement. Yes, we've seen it increase from ultra historic lows. The number of Toronto foreclosures for sale right now is about 200, or 1% of all active listings. There's not this massive amount of them kicking around right now. If you take my market, Regina, Saskatchewan, where we actually have a higher percentage of active listings that are foreclosures, it's 2% right now, and a third of all those are in the highest crime, worst neighborhoods of the city. Only one of those properties I would consider to be more representative of a quote-unquote average house in Regina. Now, it doesn't mean there aren't some fantastic properties you can find in foreclosure, and potentially you're going to see more of them as we see delinquency rates and foreclosure rates increase. But just understand that the majority of these foreclosure sales aren't super high quality listings, which are not very great listings actually. That brings me to an important question here. Are bank foreclosures a good purchase? And the answer is not always, not automatically. There absolutely can be some good ones, but they're not always going to be a good deal. Let me explain why. When it's a power of sale, automatically it's probably not the best deal on the market because the bank is legally required to get the best possible sale price for that house, highest sale price, because any of the profits after everybody's been paid out are due to the original owners. The bank doesn't get to collect those properties, so they have to legally, this is mandated by the courts, ensure they get the highest price possible. And even when it's a foreclosure house where the bank is taking over title, it's not going to always automatically be a good deal as well because of mortgage default insurance. Whether the purchaser had that as part of the purchase, if you're putting less than 20% down, you have to have mortgage default insurance, and it's insurance for the lender, not for the buyer, but the buyer pays for it. As well, many times banks will back end insure the property even if the purchaser does put down 20%, the banks will go and insure that. And because that insurance is in place, the insurer, which actually might be the one that takes over the property, not the lender itself, when that happens, whether it's insurer taking over or the insurance is in place and the bank is selling it, then the bank has to demonstrate that they've got fair market value for that property in order to trigger that insurance policy. Unlike the United States, where they will fire sale houses like crazy, and there's some fantastic deals that get bought for darn near pennies on the dollar. Guess we don't talk about pennies anymore because we don't have them. That doesn't happen in Canada because that insurance policy, if they go and fire sale that property, the insurer is going to say, well, you fire saled it, you didn't sell for market value, and we're not paying out that insurance. But once you've gone out and you've found that great property, when it comes to actually writing an offer, just remember when it comes to negotiations, the banks basically always counter. It pretty much doesn't matter what offer you put in, they're pretty much always going to counter. I used to say always, and the reason I say pretty much is because I just had a situation where we put an offer we thought had no chance of getting accepted, and the bank took an offer, and we ended up getting a really good deal on this house, I thought at least. But remember too, the bank is going to counter at one of two things. They're going to counter at what they're willing to sell the price at, that's their bottom dollar today, or sometimes they're countering at what the minimum mandated court accepted price is, because you have to remember that there are times when the court will set a mandated minimum price. In order for the bank to take a lower price, they actually have to go back to court and get that sale price approved. So they will often counter at the bare minimum they can accept. When it comes to bank repossessions, you have to be patient and aggressive at the same time. Being patient, waiting for that right deal to come around when you found that house that you definitely know is a diamond in the rough, that you can improve it and make it better, but also be aggressive when that house comes up, because they're probably not going to last very long if they actually are that true good deal. Because guess what? There's other people, I take them around all the time, looking for those fantastic repossession deals. They're going to snap those up as well. So when you find the right one, being patient to find the right one, be aggressive and go get it. I hope this taught you everything you need to know about buying a foreclosure house in Canada, and you can find a great repossession deal for that future house that you're looking at. If you have more questions, please leave them in the comments below so I can get them answered for you, and maybe make a subsequent video based on those questions. If you haven't already, subscribe to Bald Prairie Real Estate so you can keep updated on the Canadian real estate market and not miss any of my monthly market updates. Here's a video that the YouTube algorithm says you should watch next. And as always, thanks very much for watching.